Believe me, I genuinely wanted to talk about this topic earlier, and I did want to make commentary about this Auston Matthews situation in Toronto. But the unfortunate truth is, the fact that the Toronto Maple Leafs ended up winning the gosh darn draft lottery throws a ginormous monkey wrench into the Auston Matthews trade conversation. Of course, you can understand why, right? Auston Matthews potentially getting his Mitch Marner replacement in Gavin McKenna first overall. Either that or the Leafs go with Ivar Stenberg first overall, like Frank Saravalli says. But either way, we have some conversations to dive into when it comes to Auston Matthews of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and it was all started by one Chris Johnston on The Athletic earlier this week. The Maple Leafs are on the clock with Auston Matthews. This will be linked in the description, as will be the Spectre's hockey piece from May 5th. Chris Johnston believes the Toronto Maple Leafs are on the clock with team captain Auston Matthews. The 28-year-old superstar center has 2 years left on his contract, but league sources say he still isn't sure if he'll be back in the fall. Matthews has reasonable concerns over the Maple Leafs' direction under new GM John Chayka. The two are expected to meet within the next 2 weeks. Chayka said he's not putting a deadline on the Leafs captain regarding his own intentions. Johnston believes Matthews wants to see a roster that's meaningfully upgraded by trades and free agent signings. Keeping the high-scoring center in the fold will be critical to keep the club's plans to retool the roster rather than a full-fledged rebuild. As great a player as Matthews is, the Maple Leafs will not get full value for him in a trade. Johnston believes the best-case scenario would be a return comparable to the package of future assets the Vancouver Canucks received from the Minnesota Wild for Quinn Hughes last December. Now, I'm thinking about it like this. You're thinking that's not full value? I mean, I know Quinn Hughes ain't Auston Matthews technically, but we haven't really seen anybody that is at that value or more valuable get traded since Quinn Hughes, right? So if you're projecting Quinn Hughes' trade package return as a potential Matthews trade package return, would that not automatically be fine? I don't know. You can let me know your thoughts in the comments section whether or not Auston Matthews deserves to be placed in a higher echelon of trade value compared to Quinn Hughes. The Canucks got a lot of good stuff out of that trade. Ogren's awesome. Booyam is awesome. Rossi has been amazing. And there's a first-round pick on top of that. The Toronto Maple Leafs, even though they could get a bunch of futures, I'd still say that there's a lot of value to be had for Auston Matthews, if that is a similar trade package. It's not like, oh, they're getting undersold here. Spectre's note goes out there and says this: John Chayka faces a daunting task attempting to retool the Leafs this summer. Selling Matthews on his plans could be his biggest challenge. If John Chayka fails, he'll have to peddle Matthews for the best return he can find, which won't be easy given the latter's no-move clause. Yeah, Quinn Hughes didn't have a no-move clause either, but he was essentially treated as if he had one. Matthews will waive his clause if he wants out, but he will likely only have a handful of preferred destinations. The fewer he has, the harder it would be for Chayka to land a quality return. Convincing Matthews to stay will be a far better option for Chayka than trying to move him for a return that won't come close to being fair market value. There also is a little bit of nuance here too, because Quinn Hughes, while it's very apparent that a lot of folks around the NHL wanted Quinn Hughes, there were only really 2 teams that were actually willing to trade for him without the guarantee of a contract extension. Those teams were Minnesota and New Jersey. So it wasn't really like there was a huge bidding war for the guy, even though he was a super highly touted trade target. Auston Matthews could close in on similar boundaries if he were to enter the trade market too. But the fact that Chris Johnston is going out there and writing about it, this is the big update, right? He believes the Maple Leafs are on the clock, and league sources say that Matthews himself isn't sure that he'll be back in the fall. Johnston's report got a lot of pushback on various parts of social media, and even on Twitter, you had TSN Overdrive folks, Noodles, Hayes, and O-Dog speaking with John Chayka yesterday about the Chris Johnston, Auston Matthews reports. That's not my understanding, Chayka said, on the reports of Matthews potentially looking to depart the Maple Leafs. Here's a tweet by Grug Tank. Chris Johnston's reputation is on a massive downward trend. This post had 349 likes and 50,000 views. He also replied, I learned that people could report anything no matter how baseless it is or how it's spun or framed, and it'll be believed by the masses. I also learned that your actual GM denying the report doesn't matter. People will choose to believe the reports regardless. Also, people don't understand the top priority for MSM is generating attention, which a report like this certainly did. They always spin things, exaggerate things, frame things at vulnerable times to fit narratives or generate buzz. That's the priority for the mainstream media. Now, media literacy and social media evaluation talk aside, whether or not it's true Auston Matthews is in a vulnerable spot with his future with the Maple Leafs, I do think that the acquisition of Gavin McKenna will help. It's not going to fix it, but who's to say that grabbing a guy at first overall like Gavin McKenna, a Nikita Kucherov-esque winger, is not going to entice Matthews to sticking around, right? Either that or they go with an Ivar Stenberg instead, and Matthews gets a really nice all-around option, a Lucas Raymond of sorts, maybe a little more defensively polished than Gavin McKenna, thus fulfilling more of a Marner replacement type role with the team. There certainly are a number of ways you can attack the 2026 draft if you're the Maple Leafs at first overall. The fact that we've already seen Maple Leafs fans in public walking around with Gavin McKenna Toronto jerseys kind of indicates where this headspace seems to be when it comes to the Maple Leafs and their fans. How crazy is it as well? The Maple Leafs missed the playoffs twice in the past 10 years, and both times they missed, they ended up winning the gosh darn draft lottery. You can say 2020 doesn't count because, yes, they technically missed out on the playoffs that year. However, they missed out because they lost the play-in. But you take a look at the 2020 NHL Entry Draft, the Maple Leafs were in the running to be, Team E, potentially winning that Alexis Lafreniere pick. They had a 12.5% chance, but they ended up losing to the Rangers. This is the only time they lost the draft lottery, technically. But 2016, they get Auston Matthews. 2026, 10 years later, they walk into Buffalo, potentially drafting Gavin McKenna. Also, might I remind you, Auston Matthews was drafted in Buffalo too. It was written in the stars, wasn't it? Plus the fact that the TSN Overdrive guys actually had a mock draft where Toronto ended up getting first, or not a mock draft, a mock lottery. It's too poetic to ignore at this point. And ultimately, we just got to sit here and see whether or not Auston Matthews will be a part of this Leafs core that includes the likes of a Gavin McKenna or an Ivar Stenberg. Frank Saravalli went out there and said that Stenberg could go first overall and McKenna could slip over to Vancouver at number 3. So take with that information what you will. But thoughts in the comment section below about Chris Johnston's report, how the Leafs are on the clock with Auston Matthews, and it's not guaranteed that he's going to stick around. How do you feel about this reporting? Do you think it's accurate? Do you think it's actually indicative of what's going on? And how do you feel about the response from John Chayka saying that's not his understanding? It seems to be pretty good internally. How do you feel about it externally? Thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.